It was, in my completely unbiased opinion, the single greatest achievement in amateur suburban landscaping in the history of zip code 80123. I stood on my back patio, a cold beer sweating in my hand, admiring my handiwork. I'd call it a fire pit, but that felt too pedestrian. This was a throne for the fire gods. A rustic, circular monument of Lowe's clearance rack stones, each one placed with the care of a drunken, slightly sunburned artist. I called it Gary. Gary is majestic, isn't he? I said to my wife, Sarah, who was watching me through the kitchen's sliding glass door. She slid it open, the sound cutting through the perfect 6:00 p.m. stillness of our neighborhood. The Pines at Blandview Farms. A name that really captured the soul of the place. A sea of beige vinyl siding and meticulously identical HOA-approved mailboxes. "You named the fire pit Gary?" she asked, stepping out. She was smiling, but it was the kind of smile that says, "I love you, but I'm also calculating the collateral damage." "He looked like a Gary," I said, taking a sip. "Stoic, a little rough around the edges, full of potential for creating delicious charred meats. You know, a Gary." "Well, Gary," Sarah said, crossing her arms, "is about to cause an international incident." She didn't even have to nod. I knew who she meant. My gaze drifted from my glorious stone creation to the property line, a line of invisible but terrifyingly real energy that separated my kingdom from hers. Brenda, my next-door neighbor, the president for life of the HOA, the one who measures the height of her neighbor's grass with a tape measure. Brenda was a woman who wore pristine white tennis shorts to fetch her mail at 10:00 a.m., always carrying a clipboard and a pen that clicked with the finality of a judge's gavel. "She's not even out here," I said, a little too defensively. "She's probably inside, laminating new rules, or alphabetizing her spice rack. She won't even notice." "Mark," Sarah said, "you just spent 4 hours banging rocks together with a rubber mallet. You were grunting. The entire neighborhood noticed. The International Space Station probably noticed." As if summoned by the mere mention of her name, the thwack, thwack, thwack of New Balance sneakers on asphalt began. It was a sound that struck fear into the hearts of men who just wanted to leave their trash cans out for an extra hour. She power-walked into view, her silver-gray ponytail so tight it looked like it was pulling her face into a permanent state of surprise. Her visor was aimed directly at her path, a precision instrument of suburban surveillance. Thwack, thwack, thwack. She was level with my driveway. Thwack, thwack, thwack. The sound stopped. Dead. There was a silence so profound, I thought a bird might fall out of the sky. Her head, which seemed to be on a pneumatic swivel, rotated exactly 45 degrees to lock onto my patio, to lock onto Gary. She didn't move. She didn't speak. She just stared. Her eyes narrowed. Her lips, which were already a thin beige line, somehow disappeared completely. Then she unhooked the pen from her clipboard. Click. And she scribbled. It wasn't just writing. It was an attack. It was the most aggressive, furious scribbling I had ever witnessed. It sounded like she was trying to start a fire on the paper with the pen. She was stabbing at the page, her entire arm vibrating with a righteous fury. "And we have ignition," I muttered, taking a long pull from my beer. "Not in the pit, in the cairn." "I told you," Sarah whispered, already backing toward the kitchen door. "That's a Section 4 violation. Unapproved landscaping alterations. You poked the bear, Mark." I did not poke anything, I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. I assembled. It's a key suburban difference. Besides, it's beautiful. It's my property. It's the American dream. What's she going to do? Sarah just looked at me. She CC'd the city sanitation department last month because Dave's recycling bin was visibly overflowing 2 days before pickup. You just built a pagan ritual site in your backyard. You're toast. It's not a pagan ritual site, I yelled, but she was already inside, the glass door sliding shut, leaving me and Gary to face the impending doom alone. Brenda finished her scribble, each line a new curse upon my house. She gave the clipboard a solid, satisfied tap. She didn't look at me. She didn't need to. She just adjusted her visor, her face a mask of cold, bureaucratic victory, and thwack, thwack, thwacked her way down the street, the herald of my destruction. Well, Gary, I said to the pit, I think we're in for it. I went inside and started digging through the junk drawer for the HOA bylaws. I had a feeling I was going to need to know exactly what Section 4, subsection C, paragraph 9 said. It turned out it said Gary was a permanent and unapproved alteration to the designated yard space, subject to immediate removal and potential fines. She laminated the bylaws she gave us, Mark, Sarah reminded me from the couch. You're not going to find a loophole in something that's been sealed in plastic. She was right. I hated that she was right. But the night was young, and I had a bag of marshmallows and a deep-seated primal need to burn wood in my own backyard. Brenda had fired the first shot with her pen. I was about to fire back. With hickory. You can't let a little thing like a clipboard-wielding despot stop you from living your best, most flammable life. That's what I told myself as the sun began to dip below the perfectly uniform rooflines of Blandview Farms. I had marshmallows, jet-puffed, the big ones. I had hickory, kiln-dried for a cleaner smoke, according to the bag, and I had 2 kids, Jake, 10, and Mia, 8, who had been promised s'mores and were now vibrating with sugar-fueled anticipation. Dad, are we lighting Gary? Jake asked, holding 2 long, pointy sticks he'd found. We are absolutely lighting Gary, I said, stacking the wood in a perfect log cabin formation. Tonight, we feast. Tonight, we make s'mores. Is Angry Lady Brenda going to yell at us? Mia asked, clutching her chocolate bars. Not tonight, sweetie. Tonight, Angry Lady Brenda is just going to have to deal with the delicious, non-offensive aroma of freedom. Sarah watched from the window, shaking her head, but she'd brought out the graham crackers. She was an enabler, and I loved her for it. I struck the match. The kindling caught, the small flames licked the logs, and within minutes, it was happening. A beautiful, contained, perfectly legal, by city code at least, fire crackled to life. It was perfect. The smoke went straight up. The kids were ecstatic. I was a hero. I was a king. This is the life, I said, leaning back in my patio chair. The sky was a deep purple. The first stars were out. The only sound was the crackle of the fire, and Jake and Mia arguing over the correct way to toast a marshmallow. Jake was a total carbonization guy. Mia preferred a light golden brown. The bliss lasted for exactly 7 minutes. Excuse me! Excuse me! The voice cut through the idyllic scene like a chainsaw through a meditation retreat. Brenda. She hadn't just walked over. She had materialized from the dusk, standing at the very edge of my property line like a vampire who hadn't been invited in. She was wearing a different outfit, khaki shorts and a polo shirt, her evening casual, apparently. but the clipboard was the same. "Oh, hi, Brenda," I said, forcing a cheerfulness that was borderline psychotic. "Beautiful night, isn't it? Want a s'more? This one's got a really nice char. Jake's specialty." Jake proudly held up a flaming, bubbling mass of black goo. Brenda's nose wrinkled, as if the very concept of a s'more was personally offensive. You lit it?" she said, her voice a tight, strangled squeak. "Well, yeah, Brenda. That's kind of what a fire pit is for. We're just making some—" "That structure is not code," she barked, taking a bold, rule-violating step onto my actual lawn. "I warned you." "Warned me? You scribbled, Brenda. That's not a warning. That's avant-garde art. Besides, Gary's not a structure. He's just a pile of rocks, harmless, like Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, but less muscular and not running for president." "It is an unapproved, permanent open-flame installation," she shrieked, and I swear her eyes glowed a faint red in the firelight. "Section 4, subsection C, paragraph 9, and the smoke." "The smoke?" I looked up. The gentle, fragrant hickory smoke was wafting lazily, directly towards her open living room window. Okay, maybe she had a tiny point there. "It's an irritant," she yelled. "It's a hazard. It's getting on my ornamental hydrangeas. I have asthma." "You do not have asthma, Brenda," I said, lowering my stick. "I saw you at the neighborhood 5K. You won your age group." "My dog is sensitive," she retorted, clutching her clipboard to her chest. "This is a gross, flagrant violation. I am documenting this." She unclipped her pen. Click. "Document away, Brenda," I said, suddenly feeling very tired. "We're just trying to enjoy a Saturday night. Mia, put the chocolate on the cracker." "You will be hearing from the board," she yelled. This conflagration will not stand." She huffed off, a small puff of offended khaki and polo shirt-wearing air disappearing into the darkness. "What's a conflagration, Dad?" Jake asked. "It's what angry ladies call a good time," I said, passing him another marshmallow. "Now burn this one too." The rest of the night was tense. We made the s'mores, but the joy was gone. We ate them in a kind of defiant silence, all of us, even Sarah, who had joined us, staring at Brenda's dark, accusing windows. We put the fire out, doused, stirred, and doused again, until Gary was just a pile of wet, sad rocks. The next morning, it was there, taped to my front door. Not just taped, aggressively taped, with heavy-duty packing tape. It was a letter on the official HOA letterhead, "The Pines at Bland View Farms, where uniformity is our priority." And, as Sarah had predicted, it was laminated. The cold, plastic-sealed letter felt heavy in my hand. It was an official cease and desist and notice of violation. To Mark, my last name, 1245 Beige View Court, from the Architectural Review Committee, aka Brenda. Date, yesterday. Subject, violation. Section 4C9, unapproved permanent structure and nuisance smoke. Dear Mr., my last name, it has come to the attention of the board that you have erected an unapproved, permanent, open-flame installation, colloquially known as a fire pit, on your property. This is in direct violation of the covenants, conditions, and restrictions. Furthermore, the resulting nuisance smoke from your conflagration on the evening of date was a significant irritant to your neighbors and their pets, posing a potential health hazard. See Bylaw 7A, Nuisance Activities. You are hereby ordered to cease all burning activities immediately. Desist from any future use of said installation. Dismantle and remove the unapproved structure within 48 hours. Failure to comply will result in daily fines of $50, followed by further legal action. Your prompt cooperation is expected. Where uniformity is our priority. Brenda, her last name, President, HOA. It was CC'd to the entire HOA board, the city's code enforcement office, and for some reason I still can't fathom, the Bland View Farms Landscaping Committee. She laminated it, I said to Sarah, feeling a cold dread mix with a hot, simmering rage. I told you, Sarah said, sipping her coffee. She's a professional. You're an amateur, Mark. You brought a marshmallow to a clipboard fight. This is not over, I said, crumpling the laminated letter, which immediately and frustratingly sprang back to its original shape. This is so not over. I'm not a guy who backs down. Not when I'm right. And I was mostly right. Morally right, anyway. I spent the next 48 hours in a fugue state. I wasn't just a suburban dad. I was a legal scholar, a freedom fighter. I read the bylaws, all 112 pages of them. I read them until my eyes bled. Sarah found me asleep on the couch, my face stuck to the pet and livestock restrictions page. Section 8. No chickens, swine, or exotic animals. Brenda was technically right about permanent structures. But Gary was about as permanent as a Jenga tower. My whole case rested on the definition of permanent. Thus began the great email war of Blandview Farms. From mark.rocks@gmail.com to HOA Board, hoaboard@blandview.org. CC brendabrenda.rules@blandview.org. Subject, violation notice, 1245, Beige View Court. Dear HOA Board and Brenda, thank you for your shiny letter. I'm writing to clarify a small misunderstanding regarding my rustic stone assembly, known affectionately as Gary. The term permanent structure, Section 4C9, clearly implies something with a foundation, cement, or something that can't be, moved. Gary is, in fact, a movable, decorative, rustic stone assembly. The stones are dry stacked. They are not mortared. To prove my point, please see the attached photo, img0451.jpg, of me nudging Gary a full 6 inches to the left. As he is clearly non-permanent and movable, he is not in violation. The nuisance smoke was a one-time hickory incident, and I'm happy to switch to a more neutral-smelling wood, like unsmelly wood. Checkmate. Regards, Mark, 1245 Beige View Court. The reply came in 14 minutes. 14. She must have had her email open, just waiting, her fingers poised over the keyboard. From Brenda, her last name, brenda.rules@blandview.org, to Mark, my last name, mark.rocks@gmail.com, HOA Board, hoaboard@blandview.org. City Code Enforcement Code at city.gov. Ron, HOA Treasurer, ron.counts@blandview.org. Cynthia, HOA Secretary, cynthia.notes@blandview.org. Subject, violation notice, 1245, Beige View Court. My last name, the nudging of a structure does not negate its permanence. A refrigerator is movable, but you can't keep it on your lawn. Section 5B. Lawn debris and appliances. Gary is a fire pit. It is a structure. Your attempt to find a loophole is noted and is not appreciated. The smoke is a hazard. The conflagration is a hazard. My dog, Princess, had a sneezing fit. This is a health and safety issue. The 48-hour deadline stands. The fines will begin accruing tomorrow at 9:00 a.m. Style, font size. Who? Brenda S. Note. I do not appreciate being called Brenda in an official capacity. My title is Board President. From Ron, HOA Treasurer, ron.counts@blandview.org to Brenda, her last name, Mark, my last name. CC, HOA Board, City Code Enforcement, Cynthia, HOA Secretary. Subject, violation notice. Brenda, please stop CCing the entire city government. Mark, just move the rocks, man. It's not worth the fine. From Brenda, her last name. Brenda rules@blandview.org. To Ron, HOA Treasurer, ron.counts@blandview.org. CC, Mark, my last name, HOA Board, City Code Enforcement, Cynthia, HOA Secretary. Another city email address. Subject, violation notice. Ron, you are not taking this seriously. This is a fire hazard. I am trying to protect our property values. I was defeated. The email war was lost. Ron, my only potential ally, had folded. I was about to type my surrender and ask if I could pay the fine in installments when Brenda escalated. She called the cops. It was 7:00 p.m. on a Tuesday. I wasn't even burning anything. I was just sitting on the patio drinking a beer, mourning Gary, who was still assembled. A loud official knock echoed from the front door. I opened it to find a police officer. He looked tired. He had the most profoundly exhausted eyes I had ever seen, like he'd just finished a 48-hour shift at a heavy metal concert where everyone lost their wallets. "Evening, sir," he said, his hand on his belt. "Name's Officer Miller. We got a call about an uncontrolled burn." I just stared at him. "An uncontrolled burn? Officer, I'm drinking a Coors Light and contemplating my life choices. The only thing uncontrolled is my disappointment." Officer Miller sighed. It was a sigh that came from deep in his soul, a sigh that had seen too many lost cats and noisy neighbor disputes. "Is that your fire pit?" he asked, pointing past me, through the house to the backyard. "That's Gary," I said. "He's a friend." "Right. Look, sir, did you have a fire tonight?" "No, sir, not since Saturday. And I got a very shiny laminated letter about that." Officer Miller's whole body slumped in a moment of weary recognition. He pinched the bridge of his nose. "Let me guess. Clipboard, white visor? Thinks conflagration is a word you use in normal conversation?" You know her?" I felt a surge of hope. "Know her? Son, she's our frequent flyer. She called 911 last month because a delivery truck was idling suspiciously. It was a FedEx truck." He looked past me at the pit, then at Brenda's house, where I could see the blinds twitching. "Look, man," Miller said, lowering his voice. "Between you and me, it's a fire pit. I'm looking at it. By city code, you're fine. It's more than 25 feet from a structure. It's not a burn ban day. You've got a water source, right? There." He pointed at my garden hose. "This is..." She called. I'm shocked, I tell you. Just, look, I have to write a report now, because she used the words uncontrolled burn and hazard. It's so much paperwork. Just Try not to antagonize her? For my sake? The paperwork is a nightmare. So you're saying I'm legally lit? I asked, a small grin playing on my face. Officer Miller did not grin. I'm saying I'm going to go tell her that the situation is handled. Don't make me come back here, Mark, please. I'm supposed to be at my kid's t-ball game. He left, a good man broken by the suburbs. I felt a surge of victory. The law was on my side. The actual law, not Brenda's laminated paper tiger law. My victory lasted until the emergency HOA meeting. Brenda, having failed to defeat me with police, went nuclear. She called an emergency meeting of the HOA board. It was held in the community center clubhouse, a sad beige room that smelled like stale coffee and regret. It was me versus Brenda. Ron the treasurer, Cynthia the secretary, a nervous woman who looked like she was about to cry, and a guy named Todd, who I'm pretty sure was asleep, were the jury. I made my case. Movable, rustic, non-permanent. Officer Miller said it was fine. Then Brenda stood up. She hadn't brought her clipboard. She'd brought a binder. A 3-inch white binder with a label maker tag that read, Fire Pit Violations. 1245 Beige View. It had photos. Blurry, zoomed-in photos of Gary from every conceivable angle. Photos of me buying the stones at Lowe's. Was she following me? Printed copies of my emails. An expert opinion she'd gotten from her brother-in-law, who was a structural engineer. He designed strip malls. The bylaws are clear, she said, her voice dripping with triumph. It's a structure. It's unapproved. And it smells. The vote was 3-1. Todd woke up, looked confused, and voted with Brenda. I was defeated. Gary was condemned. The 48-hour clock had run out. The fines were starting. I was a broken man. The next day was one of the darkest in my suburban dad tenure. The dismantling of Gary was a solemn, mournful affair. I moved each 50-pound stone, one by one, to a sad, undignified pile behind my shed. It felt like a Viking funeral, only I was the one killing the Viking. And there was no glorious boat, just a wheelbarrow and a lot of lower back pain. I heard Brenda's blinds snap open to observe the compliance. I didn't look. I couldn't. That evening, I sat on the patio, drinking what I'd come to call a sad beer. I stared at the empty patch of grass where Gary used to be. It was a perfect circle of slightly more vibrant green, a scar of what once was. It was a bald spot of failure, right in the middle of my backyard kingdom. She won, Sarah, I said, when my wife joined me. The clipboard warrior won. She beat me with lamination and a binder. She didn't win, Mark, Sarah said, sitting next to me. She just has no other hobbies. It's sad, really. It's not sad, it's infuriating. What am I supposed to do now? Just not have fire? Just grill on a propane grill? Like a savage? A lot of people use propane, honey. It's not the same. It's just heat. It has no soul. I stewed in my own soulless, fireless existence for a while. Sarah went inside to make dinner, probably in the oven, the indoor, non-Brenda offending oven. I pulled out my phone. I needed comfort. I needed to know I wasn't alone in this fight. I opened up Reddit. I scrolled past the news, past the cute animals, and went straight to my sanctuary. Our malicious compliance. These were my people. The man who was told to get a doctor's note for his time off. so he had his proctologist write it on a prescription pad. The employee told to follow the new inefficient rules exactly, who then bankrupted the department by doing so. These were the heroes. I read story after story, my sad beer slowly turning into an angry, inspired beer. I was looking for an answer. I was looking for a sign. And then I saw it. A post from a guy in Arizona. His HOA told him he couldn't have a portable basketball hoop. The rule was no permanent or portable sporting equipment visible from the street. So he'd painted a regulation-size basketball court on his driveway. It wasn't equipment. It was just paint. My brain started to whir. I put my beer down. I went to my office. I pulled up the HOA bylaws, all 112 pages of laminated hell. I didn't look at Section 4. I already knew that one by heart. I went to Section 7, Nuisance Activities. Brenda had nailed me on nuisance smoke. But what wasn't a nuisance? I scrolled down. And there it was. Section 7C, Barbecues and Grilling. Standard barbecuing and grilling activities on portable cooking appliances are a recognized and permitted neighborhood activity. This includes, but is not limited to, standard-sized charcoal grills, propane gas grills, and smokers, portable cooking appliances. Brenda's whole case against Gary rested on two pillars: permanent structure and open-air fire pit, which wasn't for cooking. The rules were silent on what constituted a portable cooking appliance. A smoker was explicitly allowed. A smoker makes smoke. It's in the name. She couldn't get me on nuisance smoke if it was coming from an approved appliance. A slow, maniacal grin spread across my face. My fingers flew across the keyboard. I Googled, largest portable cooking appliance. I Googled, weirdest outdoor ovens. I Googled, HOA-proof fire loophole. And then, I found it. It was big. It was clay. It was technically portable. It came on a small cast-iron stand, with wheels. It got up to 900 degrees. It used charcoal or wood. And it wasn't a fire pit. It was a tandoor. I walked back into the kitchen. Sarah was chopping carrots. "Honey," I said, my voice calm, almost dangerously so. "Quick question. What's the HOA's official stance on high-temperature, vertical, cylindrical, clay-based South Asian cooking vessels?" Sarah stopped chopping. The thunk of the knife on the cutting board echoed in the silence. She slowly turned to face me. "Mark, what did you just Google?" "It's not a fire pit, honey," I said, barely able to contain my glee. "It's a tandoor. You know, for naan, delicious, fluffy, non-controversial naan. You don't know how to make naan. I have YouTube, a credit card, and a deep, simmering well of suburban spite. I'll learn." Sarah stared at me for a long time. She saw the look in my eyes, the look of a man who had been pushed too far, a man who had read Arash malicious compliance and understood. "You're going to buy a 400-pound oven just to annoy Brenda," she said. It wasn't a question. "I'm going to buy a 400-pound oven to embrace multicultural culinary arts," I corrected her. "Annoying Brenda is just a delightful pinch of spice, a little garam masala on the meal of life." She sighed. "I need to buy more flour, don't I?" "Gallons of it," I said, clicking Buy Now on a 400-pound beige clay pot of suburban warfare. We're going into the bread business. The tandoor, it turned out, couldn't just sit on the grass. According to the Intro to Tandoori videos I was now consuming like a college student during finals week, the 400-pound clay behemoth needed a stable, level, heat-proof base. My patio was not level, and this thing was going on the grass. I needed professionals. I called a local landscaping crew, Stonework Steve and the other Steve. They rolled up in a rusty Ford F-150, both named Steve, both looking like they'd been building retaining walls since before I was born. "All right," said Stonework Steve, the one with the clipboard, a non-threatening, manly clipboard. "Mark, right? You called about a pad for a grill?" "Yes," I said, leading them to the backyard, to the sad circular scar where Gary used to be. "Right here. I need a 4x4 concrete slab. Reinforced, heat-proof." Steve looked at the space. "No problem. For a big grill? A green egg? Smoker?" "Sort of," I said, trying to sound casual. "It's a tandoor." Both Steves stopped. They looked at me. They looked at each other. "A what?" said the other Steve, who hadn't spoken until this point. "A tandoor. You know, vertical clay oven. Gets to about 800, 900 degrees. For naan." Stonework. Steve spat a stream of tobacco juice onto the grass, a clear Section 7 violation. But I wasn't about to say anything. "A tandoor?" The other. Steve's eyes lit up. "Like, for Indian bread? Tandoori chicken? That kind of tandoor?" "The very same," I said, relieved. "I'm getting really into naan. Big time." Stonework. Steve looked at my house. He looked at the perfectly manicured beige prison of Blandview Farms. Then his eyes drifted to Brenda's house. She was, of course, pretending to trim her rose bushes, but her gaze was locked on us. A slow, beautiful, tobacco-stained grin spread across Stonework Steve's face. "Right," he said, a new understanding in his voice. "Naan. Got it." He looked at the patch of grass. "So, you want this pad level. You want it reinforced. You want it facing her window, or—" No, I said, a little too quickly. Just centered. You know, somewhere the wind will carry the delicious, non-offensive, culinary aromas everywhere." "I hear you," the other Steve said, patting me on the shoulder. "We'll make this thing stable enough to land a helicopter on." They were good men. They did good work. And they did it all while Brenda watched, her pruning shears snapping angrily at non-existent deadheads on her bushes. 2 days later, the tandoor arrived. It came on a freight truck. The delivery guy, who looked like he deadlifted refrigerators for fun, wheeled it up my driveway on a pallet jack. It was glorious. It was a beige, cylindrical clay pot of pure, unadulterated spite, housed in a sleek, stainless steel jacket. It stood about 4 feet high, and most importantly, at the bottom of its custom-made iron stand were 4 tiny, almost comically small wheels. The delivery guy and I wrestled it onto the new concrete pad. It looked like a beige R2-D2 had a baby with a chimney. It was the most beautiful and most terrifying thing I had ever owned. "What is it?" he asked, wiping his brow. "It's a portable cooking appliance," I said, tapping one of the tiny wheels, which had already sunk about a 1/4 inch into the new concrete. "See? Portable." "Right," he said, and left, probably to tell his friends about the weirdo in Blandview Farms. I spent the next 2 days curing it, which is a process of starting very small fires inside to acclimate the clay. This naturally produced small, non-threatening but still visible puffs of smoke. Brenda was concerned. I saw her taking pictures. I saw her on the phone pointing. I was just waiting. The knock came on the 2nd day of curing. I knew it was coming. I opened the door. Officer Miller. He looked broken. His shoulders were slumped. His hat was in his hand. He looked like a man who had just been told his vacation was canceled. "Mark," he said. His voice was a flat, dead monotone. "Please, for the love of God, for my sanity, for the future of my pension." "What is that?" "Officer Miller, good to see you. Come on in," I said. "I'm not coming in, Mark. I'm standing right here. What is the urn in your backyard? We're getting calls." "Calls? Plural?" "A call. From her. About unpermitted construction and a large, smoking thing." "Oh, that," I said, laughing. "Officer, you're going to love this. It's a grill, a tandoori oven, you know, for multicultural culinary pursuits." I walked him to the back patio. He stood, just staring at the tandoor, which was gently puffing a thin, white stream of smoke. "It's a portable cooking appliance, officer," I said, giving the tiny wheel a hopeful kick. "See? Wheels, just like a Weber. Section 7C of the bylaws. Fully permitted." Officer Miller looked at the 400-pound clay and steel behemoth. He looked at the tiny, non-functional wheels. He looked at the 4x4 concrete helipad it was sitting on. He looked at me. He pinched the bridge of his nose so hard, I thought he was going to leave a dent. "Right," he said, his voice cracking. "Portable." "I'm just curing the clay," I said. "No conflagrations here. Just light prep." Brenda was on her porch. She was in her power-walking outfit. She had her phone out, probably recording. Officer Miller saw her. He didn't even sigh. He was beyond sighs. He just deflated. He turned, cupped his hands around his mouth, and yelled, in the most tired, defeated voice I've ever heard a law enforcement officer use, "Ma'am, it's a BBQ. It's a fancy grill. Go back inside. Stop calling us." He turned back to me. "I'm putting in for vacation. My wife wants to see the Grand Canyon. I just want to see a town without an HOA. I'm going to take a 2-week unpaid leave if I have to. Don't start a cult, Mark, please. The paperwork for a cult. It's worse." "No cults, officer. Just Naan." "Whatever," he mumbled, and trudged back to his car. The rest of the week was my training montage. I was Rocky, and the tandoor was my side of beef. I bought 50-pound bags of flour. I bought yeast. I bought ghee. My first batch of dough was a disaster. It was a sticky, wet mess that looked like the blob. My first attempt at slapping the dough onto the gadi, the special bread pad, ended with it flying over the fence into Brenda's yard. I just left it, let her document that. My first fire was too hot. I singed my eyebrows. My first piece of naan was a blackened, inedible charcoal briquette that I had to fish out of the bottom with tongs, but by Friday, I was getting it. The dough was right, the fire was right, I was slapping, I was a natural. The Naan Man of Blandview Farms was ready. Saturday, 4:00 p.m. The kids were inside, prepping by getting flour on every conceivable surface. Sarah was in the kitchen, making a cucumber yogurt sauce, having fully embraced her role as co-conspirator. I was in the backyard. The tandoor was at a perfect, shimmering 800 degrees. It was a charcoal-fired beast, and it was hungry. I had my dough, resting in little perfect oiled balls. I had plain dough. I had garlic and cilantro-infused dough. And because I'm a god-tier suburban dad, I had cheese-stuffed dough. Okay, I muttered to myself, taking the first ball. Let's do this. I slapped the dough onto the gotti. I took a deep breath. I leaned over the roaring, fiery mouth of the tandoor, a move that I'd practiced and which still felt like looking into the sun. And thwack. I slapped the dough onto the hot, vertical clay wall. It stuck. It stuck. I felt a surge of triumph I hadn't felt since I'd placed the last stone on Gary. I slapped another. And another. The walls were lined with my beautiful, doughy soldiers. And then, the smell started. It wasn't the brute force, smoky smell of a hickory-fired fire pit. Oh no. This was sophisticated. This was a complex, multi-layered, aromatic assault on the senses. First, it was the smell of a wood-fired pizza oven, that dry, beautiful, bready char. Then, as I pulled the first piece out with my long metal skewers, perfectly blistered, golden brown, I brushed it with melted garlic butter. That's when it happened. The smell of the baking bread, mixed with the nuclear-grade, weaponized aroma of hot, sizzling garlic, hit the 4:00 p.m. suburban air. It didn't just waft. It conquered. It rolled over the property line. It billowed through the neighborhood, an undeniable, delicious fog of war. It was a scent that didn't just say hello. It said, "Stop what you are doing. Your sad, microwaved dinner is a lie. Come hither." I heard a sound from the other side of my other fence. My neighbor on the left, Dave. A good, quiet guy who mostly just mowed his lawn. "Dude?" Dave's head appeared over the top of the fence, his nose twitching like a bloodhound's. "Mark? What is that smell? It's amazing." I held up the glistening, blistered piece of garlic naan. "It's Naan Day, Dave," I boomed, feeling like a high priest of carbs. "Come on over. Bring a friend." Okay, he disappeared. 2 minutes later, Dave was at my patio gate, holding a 6-pack of beer. "I am so in," he said. I handed him a piece. He took a bite. His eyes rolled back in his head. "Oh my God," he mumbled, his mouth full. "Mark, you're a genius." "I know, Dave, I know." Then the family from across the street, the Millers, no relation to Officer Miller, thankfully, who had been washing their car, just wandered over, drawn by the scent. We smelled bread," Mrs. Miller asked, looking confused and hungry. "Garlic naan," I said, pulling another batch from the oven. "Cheese stuffed?" "My God," Mr. Miller said. Within 20 minutes, I had a crowd. It wasn't a party, it was a gathering. The teenagers I thought only communicated in grunts were talking, asking for another one. Jake and Mia were running around, handing out paper plates. Sarah had brought out the yogurt sauce. Dave had run home and brought back tandoori chicken skewers he'd, coincidentally, had in his fridge. I was a hero. I was the Naan Man of Bland View Farms. I was slapping dough, sticking it to the 800-degree wall, pulling it out. I was a culinary rock star. And that's when she appeared. Brenda. She didn't storm. She didn't materialize. She marched. She marched onto my patio, a blatant trespass, but I wasn't about to call the cops, her face a shade of puce I had previously only seen on bad plums. The crowd, my adoring, naan-filled fans, went silent. "What is this?" she shrieked. The word "this" encompassed everything: the tandoor, the crowd, the joy, the smell. "Brenda," I said, with a huge, buttery grin. "You're just in time. I saved you a piece." I held up a particularly large, extra garlicky piece of naan. This gathering, the smell, it's overpowering. It's everywhere." Dave, mouthful of chicken and naan, stepped forward. "It's amazing, Brenda. Mark's a genius." He swallowed. "It's awesome. He's feeding the whole neighborhood." "This is a culinary nuisance," Brenda yelled, her voice getting shaky as she realized the crowd was not on her side. This is an unzoned, unlicensed bakery." I stopped. I put my tongs down. I held up my gadi. "Brenda," I said, my voice suddenly very calm. "It's a grill. I am grilling. On my portable cooking appliance, as approved by Section 7C of the bylaws you wrote." The entire neighborhood was watching. "It's my God-given American right to grill bread for my friends," I continued, feeling the spirit of Patrick Henry and our malicious compliance flow through me. "Now, are you sure you don't want a piece? This one has cheese inside." I held out the cheese-stuffed naan. Brenda looked at the naan. She looked at the faces of her neighbors: Dave, the Millers, the teenagers, even Cynthia, the HOA secretary, who was hiding in the back holding a paper plate. Every single one of them was holding a piece of my delicious, rule-bending bread. She had no power here. She could ban a fire pit. She could laminate a letter. But she couldn't fight this. She couldn't ban delicious. She couldn't find community. She sputtered. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She looked at me, her eyes promising 1,000 new, more terrible rules. And then, defeated, she turned. She stomped off my patio, her tennis shoes squeaking in rage. The moment she was gone, Dave yelled, "More naan!" and the crowd cheered. The naan man was back in business. Brenda's retreat was glorious. It was a full-on, huffy, arm-swinging, "I'll get you next time" stomp-off. She disappeared into her house, and the blinds snapped shut, one by one, like a final, desperate, silent tantrum. The party raged on. The gathering had turned into a full-blown, impromptu neighborhood block party. We ran out of my dough, so the Millers ran home and brought back tortillas and hot dogs. "It's all we've got!" Mr. Miller yelled, throwing the hot dogs on my sad propane grill that I'd forgotten I owned. "Fire is fire!" I yelled back, and we grilled hot dogs and warmed up tortillas in the tandoor, and it was a glorious, multicultural, suburban mess. Naan Day became Naan Saturday. It became a thing. It wasn't a party every time. Sometimes it was just me, the kids, and Sarah. But the tandoor was always there. A silent, clay and steel sentinel of victory. But most Saturdays, the smell would start around 4 p.m. And people would just show up. The neighborhood, which had been a collection of beige siding and lawn mowing schedules, started to change. Dave brought tandoori chicken skewers every week. He'd found a recipe online. He was marinating now. Cynthia, the nervous HOA secretary, showed up with a 6-pack of IPA and a Tupperware of her mom's famous potato salad. Even Ron, the HOA treasurer, came by. He didn't eat. He just stood there with his own clipboard. Just for my records, Mark, he said. What's the cost per naan on this operation? I'm curious about the flour to ghee ratio. Just have a piece, Ron. He did. He came back the next week with a spreadsheet to help organize the toppings rotation. He couldn't help himself. I was the naan man. I'd accidentally created a community, all because I'd been told I couldn't have a fire pit. I stood on my patio a few weeks later. It was another perfect Saturday. The tandoor was blazing. Sarah was laughing with Mrs. Miller. Jake was teaching Dave's kid how to slap the dough, which mostly involved it landing on the grass. Gary the fire pit was gone. His sad green circle had finally faded, blended back into the lawn. But his sacrifice had not been in vain. Gary was the martyr. The tandoor was the revolution. I looked over at Brenda's house. The blinds were drawn. All of them. On a perfect, sunny, 70-degree Saturday afternoon. It was the white flag of a suburban surrender. I heard from Ron that she was now focusing her energy on a new pet waste initiative, complete with DNA testing. I wished her luck. Sarah came over, handing me a fresh, cold beer. The smell of garlic and char was thick in the air. "Happy now, you big dumb culinary genius?" she asked, leaning against me. I watched Dave and Ron argue over whether pineapple was an acceptable tandoori chicken skewer ingredient. I watched Cynthia show my kids a picture of her cat. "Happy?" I said, taking a sip. I looked at the beautiful, chaotic, naan-filled scene in my backyard. "Honey, I'm nonplussed." Sarah groaned so loud, Dave looked over. "Oh my God, you've been waiting all week to say that, haven't you?" "Yep," I said, pulling her in for a kiss. "Totally worth it."